Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Empathy episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so that they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. One of the biggest problems in relationship, especially what women say about men, is the lack of empathy. In this episode, you will hear an interview, or I'd say more so a discussion about empathy with an expert on the topic, the strategic advisor of the Empathic Institute. Stick around, check it out. You just might learn something. So I'm on location today with strategic advisor of Hearts in Mind and the Empathic Institute, Aaron Chavis.
Hi, Bill. Good morning.
Hey.
How are you?
Aaron, we're here to talk about empathy. And you started this Empathic Institute. One of the things that has come up for me a lot in my own private practice, clients and patients I see at the health clinic, as well as hearing from other marriage counselors, relationship coaches, is that lack of empathy is a huge issue in relationship, and especially with men. Let's start off with a definition of empathy.
Well, for me, coming out of this organization where I was trained with the emotional intelligence work, following Dan Goldman's work, it's just the ability to understand the emotion in others in a very simple way. And tying that into relationships and empathy, and that important part is just being able to connect and understand where a person's coming from and the emotional part of that they experience, making sense of their world and then making sense of your own world in a way to be together, be in unison, lock and step in relationship and communion. It's that understanding of where another person's coming from.
Right.
Reading into the emotion verbally and expressively, or what's not said, hearing what's in between the lines and picking up on it when your partner or someone's not communicating the way you need them to, but still being able to pick up on what they need to convey to you, taking that extra effort to see things from their lens.
So is it kind of like putting yourself in their shoes? So to speak?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you mentioned the emotional piece of that. Are there other components? I mean, I would think, I've heard there's like the cognitive empathy, there's the emotional empathy, and then there's the action that you need to take.
Right. Yeah, it's moving a step beyond just the experience of the emotion is how do you make decisions? How do you think through? Coming from the emotional brain into the cognitive brain when it comes to making decisions and so forth. We all experience events and those events then impact us emotionally. Think of being at work and you're in a meeting and someone sort of just yells at you. That's an event that occurs, and then you have an emotional response to that. The empathy and emotional intelligence, the thinking part, the cognitive part is how do I process this event as just an event, and then how do I behave and respond to it? Do I react in anger or some other way, or do I try to maintain and compose myself and put everything in context, and like we said, stepping in another person's shoes, asking myself what could have made this person raise their voice at me in this meeting or something like that. So it's that cognitive piece, and then the action is how you choose to respond.
So it sounds like it's pausing before you respond or react. I mean, the reaction is from whatever emotion is going on rather than pausing and getting a cognitive sense of what's going on so that you can respond, kind of take your emotions out of it for the moment to respond in a way that's more like either owning your part and seeing where they are as well.
Right. Some say that the emotional piece is just data, just like anything else. And it's informing you about something. And so the thinking part, again, is what is that something? Why am I reacting? Understanding yourself and then understanding the other person. Yeah, exactly. I agree.
I work a lot with values, and you can accept your feelings, your thoughts, and even your body sensations, your urges or pain. Yet you respond from what's important to you, what matters, or your values. So that you don't let your thoughts, feelings, and body sensations run the show.
Right. Yeah, regulation,
Yeah.
Yep, regulating emotions. And I think you hit on that key point too, of recognizing that who you are and the decisions you make aren't just solely based on you. Your outside world or outside forces kind of influence that too. Those values. You know, if you were raised a certain way and respond to anger in a certain way, you might have been taught that and think that's the way to go. And you might have to unlearn those behaviors when it comes to relationships and things like that. So that's why, you know, empathy shows up, and that's why it's important when we talk about selecting a mate or having a life partner and just happiness in relationships overall. It's that work that we need to do in order to keep a connection with our partners. It can't be one way. It's a two-way street. But
well, I often talk about making sure that your spouse or partner is seen and heard.
Yeah.
And when you are getting information from your partner and you get defensive, you put your walls up and say, no, I didn't, and you try to fight back and be right or whatever, you're losing the whole empathy piece. Because empathy is saying, I can see you're really upset. You know, that's one way to support and hear your spouse or partner out and get really clear and maybe even reflect it back. So that whether you're right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's getting a strong sense of where that person is.
And that's huge. Like, what is important for that person in that moment? And I love what you just said. It's not about me necessarily, but what does my partner need from me?
Well, what is their experience?
You
know, I've said in previous episodes, you know, reality is in the eye of the receiver. And whether I intended to hurt you or not, you're hurt. So I have to acknowledge that you are hurt, whether I did it or not, first and foremost. And that's where the empathy can come.
That's where it comes in. And it's very tough to do.
It is, especially like you said, when you may have been raised in a certain way. And quite frankly, most of us don't have these role models to exhibit empathy to learn from. So we just go from these old subconscious patterns that get all in the way of our relationship.
It gets in the way. Absolutely. Get in the way. Then you're mad. You know, the impact of that, the results of that, you know, you're not speaking to someone for a day or a week or, you know, even sleeping on the couch. It manifests its way in relationships in different ways. Or you divorce, you break up, you go separate ways. It can be generational. Children see it, and that's how they define what relationship and love should be. So empathy is critical in relationships overall, especially now. I mean, you could throw the COVID stuff or post-pandemic where we see that too. You know, people are a little more impatient because of all the stuff we've been through. And so empathy again shows up. How do you slow down and respond in a way that, like you said, honoring and recognizing what another person is going through, getting in their shoes?
Oftentimes, you know, I hear the difference between empathy and sympathy. How do you see that?
I think for me, the sympathy part might be a little detached. Like, you recognize something happened, but you don't make that extra effort to understand it. Like, I'm sorry that happened would be sympathy. For me, a statement of sympathy. I'm so sorry that happened. Empathy is maybe you acknowledge you're sorry that it's happening, but it goes a little bit deeper in terms of compassion, connection. Not necessarily that you have to do something, but that you feel what they feel and relate to it a little bit different. It might even do something to you, like you have a friend or a colleague or something who lost a significant other, a loved one, or just had a loss, period. Sympathy is, you know, sorry for your loss.
Well, it's almost like I'm sorry for you, like it's pity versus having compassion and a connection. It's kind of almost like, well, I'm so glad that I'm not going through that versus I can't imagine.
Like, what would it be like if I had to go through it?
So it's important to make that clarity, because I hear this a lot, especially from men who say, you know, I sympathize with you. I'm like, no.
Nah, it might have worked before, but we need more.
I mean, that's all good and well, and it's well intended, I think, the sympathy, yet being on the receiving end of sympathy versus empathy, that's the whole point. You know, how does it feel when somebody says, oh, well, I'm sorry that happened, or, you know, that's too bad? How does that feel after someone has been through a loss to hear that versus, oh, I'm so sorry, this must have devastated you, or whatever?
Making that connection. I think about it too, and you know, getting back to the relationship part. Sometimes when a female or woman come home and they just want to share their day, they are not always looking for men to solve something.
Right.
You know what I mean? But just hear me.
They just want to be heard.
Just want to be heard. Connect with how my day went. And I'm still working on this. I mean, it's been a long time. I'm still working on it.
Hey, we all do. We all have to work on it.
Yeah, I'm jumping into, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Right.
The person might not need that. You know, they just need to let their day go with someone they feel safe and love with.
Yeah, I mean, and men tend to be the problem solver. They've got to fix it, you know, and or, you know, oh, well, just do this or just do that.
Right.
And like, you didn't hear what I just said.
Yeah.
I don't need you to fix me. I just need you to hear me out.
Yeah.
And then maybe, you know, we can collaborate or talk about a solution. The other side of that too is she can say, hey, I just need to vent. You got time for that? Yeah. Or I had a rough day at work. Can I share this with you?
Right.
I don't need you to fix anything. But we don't always think ahead. The other side of that is, I'm not sure what you need. If she's, you know, rambling, do you need me to try to solve this?
Yeah.
Or do you just need me to listen? You know?
Right.
And I think it's getting clarity on that, you know, because we can get into these subconscious patterns and go all night long and nothing gets done, or it just keeps spinning and spinning. Or get like interpreted differently. And it's like you're saying, you never hear me. It leads up to all the stuff that we can avoid and have more productive, stronger bonds in the relationships with empathy. If we take that extra step, not assume, I guess ego can be in there. Oh, ego.
Big time, you know, and then just the social cues, men are providers and, you know, we got to do all this stuff. That gets in the way too. Yeah,
we've talked about a little bit about what empathy looks like. Maybe we can dig in a little bit deeper, like giving examples of, you know, maybe it's like, for example, like acknowledging their pain.
Yes, absolutely. Acknowledging their pain. It can be something simple. I think I just did it the other day with my fiance. We were watching Judge Judy.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Judge Judy's tough and everything. And so she admires Judge Judy, and sort of was like, yeah, Judge Judy lays it out. I mean, I knew she was going to do that. She was just so into it.
Right.
Me not thinking, I caught onto it after, but I made a statement like, why are you so excited? Like, you're not in the case. And she just put a little sad face on.
Right, because you didn't have empathy.
No, I didn't have empathy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do this for a living or whatever. But I didn't have it in that moment. And then I saw what it did and tried to correct it. You know, so empathy kicked back in. And that's another example of seeing and interpreting the body language or the reaction to something. Two is how it shows up. So you feel the pain, but you can read, you know how people say, read the room, read the body language, read your partner's tone, your partner's behaviors, your partner's mannerisms is also practicing empathy that way and picking up on, I didn't say that right. And we typically know, too. It's just, do we choose to do something with it once?
Yeah, that's the key. Like you said, you realized it, you saw the look on her face, and you were able to go within and say, oh, you know, that didn't come out right. Let me try it again. Apologize. And, you know, as long as you apologize and try to make these corrections versus apologizing and just keep apologizing and don't make those changes. Then it's for naught. But that's the important piece. That's all we can do is if we've dropped the ball, hey, we all drop the ball. We all make mistakes. We all say things we may regret. It's how do we respond after that and say, I own it, I hurt you, and I'm sorry, and if I do that again, let me know, or whatever. And that's where I think the disconnect happens in a relationship is when we're here to talk about men. So, you know, where the man just shuts down or it just says, I'm right, and then the ego kicks in and doesn't see that pain. So that adds on top of the pain.
And in part of the training that I was certified in, we go through what's called these 6 competencies, which is built into all the emotional intelligence and empathy work. Self-awareness first. That's, you know, of course, being aware of who you are and what you're feeling. Awareness of others, as we're talking about now. Then there's being authentic. So saying it in a way that's true to you, but still honoring the person so that you don't feel like, you know, I'm always giving in or, you know.
You always get your way.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So how do we stay authentic to ourselves? And then it's, you know, just emotional reasoning that we're talking about too, processing through what all the information and emotions are telling you in that moment, saying, I'm sorry, and that part. Then, you know, taking care of yourself to make space in relationship. You still got to be yourself. And then it's just like how to inspire and keep connection with your partner. So those 6 areas is what we look at around empathy, emotional intelligence, and seeing it in action.
And that's the key, action, because it's kind of what I was saying earlier. You know, you can apologize and and not taking the action to be empathetic.
Right. You're standing there with your arms folded,
right,
closed off.
Turn your back, you know, like in your corner, and you're not budging.
Right.
You know? And that, I think that's where the vulnerability comes in. Is, can I let go of this ego, this wall that's preventing me from being vulnerable to see your pain?
Yep. For men, I guess, because we're talking about men and the empathy too, what would be the risk of that? Like, why are we so hesitant in a way to be vulnerable, to take the risk? Because in one way, we had to be vulnerable in order to get our partner.
Right. Yeah.
And now that we have
some level.
Yes, you know, at some level, you had to open up and share things.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, it's like I got to either stop or I can't be who I was in the beginning for some reason. You know, like it's a whole bunch of stuff that gets in it.
We as men are programmed to put the wall up and not show our vulnerability. Right. Yet when we do, you know, it makes life so much differently.
It does, yeah. Like we go back to when you're younger as a socialized. Boys don't cry.
Yeah. I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah, all that stuff. Like, so it's almost like toughened up from the beginning and the emotions get shut off. And like, even now I'm seeing this thing too I worked a lot at one point with single moms and they babied the male. Right. And then they said they raised the woman. So they have that more tougher trait now. Yeah. And the guy in a way is softer, but not where it's aligned with what men should be also in society. I guess it's like a conflict or flip of it where you keep them so safe that they don't know how to engage.
Right. They don't have the strength to be, you know, to go within. You know, and it takes a lot of strength and courage to recognize our vulnerability.
Yeah.
It can be a really scary place for a lot of men.
And that's, you know, the importance of coaching, or for some it might be deeper and they need the therapeutic piece, or even if they don't or aren't ready to go there, start just talking. Like the work you're doing with men in particular, which I salute you for, because it is critical to be able to go into the space as men and talk about stuff we don't talk about. Or it might come out on the basketball court, or it might come out in the barbershop.
Where it's safe.
Where it's safe, right? Yeah. But then you go away from those places and the action and solution part isn't there. Right. And that's where we come in with the kind of work we do to help you move beyond just recognizing it. And like you said, go back to the action and help you figure out, well, what is it that I can do that makes sense for me in order to improve my situation, and utilize empathy in a way to better my relationships. Or some people can't even get a relationship because they lack empathy. They lack empathy.
Right. Much less be in it.
They can't
get in it.
Period. They can't even get in it, you know. And that shows up in different ways. Just talking about yourself, never giving the other person a chance to be heard. And you wonder where they went. Like, they never called me back. Nah.
Yeah.
And as a Black man, I think practicing empathy is important as a way not just to have love, successful and happy love, but for me, healing the community itself. Like even here in Philadelphia for me, like, or I'm from Trenton in Jersey, you can see the absence of healthy Black-brown relationships, the broken home piece. And then what happens when mom and dad's not in the home? It ties into all these social consequences. So for me, using empathy helps rebuild the Black family. It helps rebuild the Black community, the brown communities. Strongly encouraging Black men, brown men in particular, to go there, push past the trauma, get the coaching, get the therapy, what have you. But even before that, just starting to see yourself and your relationships with your partners, with your children, with that lens on, you know, because it can help us heal our community. And that's part of my mission too, is trying to do some of the empathy work around multiple topics, including relationships, to heal the community. You know, the violence that we see, that's anger, that's emotion, that's rage, it's something. And how do we get into their shoes a bit in order to understand? And a lot of times it's that absent mom or dad that's somewhere in the story. So if we can work at building Black love, brown love, I'm hopeful that it can ripple effect throughout the community and help rebuild in other ways, not just the financial, the educational, the spiritual, but relationship itself, love. Yeah. What is Black love? What does it look like? You know?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Aaron. Where I work at the health clinic, I mostly see Black women. Part of my motivation to do this, and not just Black women, but women in general. I hear it all the time, but especially in the Black community, that I would say, well, what if he had said this? Saying something more empathetic. And they were like, that would make all the difference in the world if you would just do that. I'm like, well, I can help people with that.
Right.
If you can buy into the mentality of that and see it as a value and how important it is to, in sustaining a relationship, man, the world's just, the relationship opens up so wide. And it's simple in theory, and it's really hard to pull it off. And we have to practice.
And we might need to trademark a term. Instead of generational wealth, generational love, or generational something.
There you go.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about the love.
Yeah, it's all about the love.
And quite frankly, I think sometimes we have to fake it until we make it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's kind of the cognitive piece of, well, at least I can think to say this. I may not totally feel empathetic towards you, but at least I can think to say these things. And I think about what I hear a lot of people say, especially around grief and things, but, like you said, any crisis event that happens or traumatic event, people can say, oh, well, everything happens for a reason, or, this too shall pass. Just look on the bright side. God has a plan and all that. And I think about back in the day, one of my colleagues, when I was on the radio, he was on the radio and he was studying to be a lawyer. And I would go into the studio and he'd have all these law books in the studio. He's studying while he's on the radio. And I'm like, that's gotta be so hard to, balance all this out. So the radio station let it go eventually. And, we found out about it, and I went into, I said, this could be the best thing that could happen to you. And he goes, how the hell do you think it's, he got mad at me. And that's before I knew all about this empathy stuff. And what I realized was I didn't feel what it'd be like to lose my job when I'm trying to keep a roof over my head and go to law school. So that was one of those statements. Everything's happened for a reason. And we think we're being supportive, and it may be true, and it's coming from a sincere, intention, yet as we talked about earlier, it doesn't land for the person who's going through it.
Yeah, they're not ready, or they're not there yet to receive it. Or if you do say it and you recognize and see how to recover from it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things, like you said earlier, I'm sorry, you're going through this. This must really suck. Something is, you think that sounds harsh, but it's just like, man, that really sucks. I hear that and I go, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Even when you don't know what to say, it's like, I don't know what to say. I can only imagine what you're going through. That's another way to show that empathy.
Right, and that ties in back into your vulnerability and being authentic too. Like, we don't have to have the answer. And if we don't have the answer or don't know what to say, that truthful part is, I really don't know what to say right now.
Right, and that's what's real. And yet, when I hear that, I'd rather hear that than you trying to tell me everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, this too shall pass.
Right. I mean, that's all good and well. I know that, yet right now I'm hurting, and I need your support. Also, you can even check in with that person, show interest, to say, hey, how you feeling about what's going on? Like, how is this for you? So they can just have a place to talk and you to listen.
Yep, to check in and confirming what you heard and reflecting it back so that it becomes this two-way thing and we still don't walk away thinking we heard something else. It's the steps in the conversation and communication that we have to, like you said, fake it till you make it. Stay mindful, like asking ourselves, did I really hear my partner? We just had a conversation, but do I really know what they're expecting of me or what they're asking of me? Or, that's part of that cognitive part of just trying to train your brain to ask questions.
Right. Tell me more. Tell me how I did that. And that way you just get clear. And again, and this is what's so important to understand, that it's not coming from malintent. It's well intended. It just doesn't come out right, and it makes a mess.
Right.
Of the whole situation.
Yep.
So I'm curious, Aaron, how did you get into this, and how have you come around to embrace empathy and understand this as a man?
I think I was doing it all along, but didn't know it. But my motivation for doing it probably was off. Two things growing up, like I was 10, 11. I hated conflict growing up. I used to live next door to a couple, and he was an abuser. Every other night or so, you just hear him just wailing in on his girl. And I remember he threw her down the steps one time. She come running over to my grandma's house. I had one of them big mamas kind of grandmoms. She brought a hot pot of water and threatened him to scald him with this water if he continued to hurt this woman and so forth. But as a 10-year-old, it was, for me, it was like, this is what relationship is. It's violent. If you get in a conflict, it's just going to be getting thrown down the steps and stuff. So I started to avoid conflict, started to get older, and you want to be in relationships. I would just start to study women in a way to see what they like, to keep them happy in order not to have conflict.
Right.
And so it started to train me to get in somebody else's shoes. And even in college, like the clothes I purchased would be not just for me, but would a woman like this? You know, a soft sweater.
Thinking about someone else.
Thinking about somebody else, stuff like that. So it started to train me without knowing it. And then as I got into my professional work, I learned about coaching, and just in the last maybe 3 years, learned about the movement of empathy again, that's taking shape in the workplace, and received a certification from this organization called GENOS International. They sort of sit on this level with another major consulting group called the Hay Group that does assessments in emotional intelligence work. So it gave me then the more structured understanding of what I was as a person all along and didn't know it, like being an empath and, you know, able to feel feelings and empathize with people, get into their shoes. And so once I connected with that organization, that's when I began to have more structured and understanding of how it works, beyond just the feeling, but the thinking, the action part. And so I got certified in that and started to practice doing emotional intelligence assessments, but then trainings and workshops and things like that. But it started as that 10-year-old kid afraid of conflict, thinking that's what relationships were.
Yeah, I feel like I've lived a similar or parallel life in that way, where my example of how relationship was modeled in my past, from my parents going through divorce, my dad remarrying, and just seeing the dynamic, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And I knew, you know, intuitively that something's not right here about how this is going on, and I just knew it could be a better way. And, you know, same thing with the conflict and things like that. Like, why can't we all just get along? Kind of thing.
Right.
And then to evolve and go through learning about this through therapy and then through certifications and trainings to where I am today. So kind of in a similar path. And I think that's where a lot of this starts. It's kind of like the wounded warrior. You know, we've had these experiences that we've been empathetic towards, and being an empath, we feel everybody. It's almost too much. What do you say to someone who is an empath, and where do they draw the line to where they're not so affected by it?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what's coming up for me too. Like, it's important for men. We're talking about men too. Some do feel it, and it's just innate in them, like our stories, I guess. So for those folks, it's like encouraging them not to run away from it. You know, don't buy into the stereotype that you have to shut your feelings down. Like, feel. And you're still a man, or you're still manly, or whatever term you want to throw in there. Like, you're still who you are. You're not soft or weak as society would try to throw on us and everything.
It's quite the opposite. It's where your strength is.
It's where your strength is,
I mentioned in one of my episodes, we're talking about vulnerability, and I saw this brother with a t-shirt on. It said, vulnerability is the new sexy.
Yeah, I like that.
And because women respond to that, or all of us respond. Men, women, we want to be vulnerable. Allows us to connect on a deeper level. And yet there needs to be safety in order to be vulnerable. So if you're with a partner or spouse who sees your vulnerability as a man, as a weakness.
Is that the person for you?
What do you do with that? Because it goes both ways.
And then you talked about the limit part. I guess what's coming up for me there is to learn how to use empathy, but don't go so far that you're not empathetic anymore, you're compromising. So you're like giving into everything and just yes, because you want to make somebody happy kind of stuff. That's not what empathy is either.
No. You got to be true to yourself. Let me say it this way. You can be true to yourself and be empathetic at the same time. I can still hold my ground and have my opinion, and that's where your strength is. But to always give in, you lose yourself.
That's important to keep at the forefront and remember, don't lose yourself in this. And conflict is natural too. Disagreement is natural, and that's okay too. So, you know, just embrace that, especially if you're with a partner for a long time. You're not going to agree all the time for the most part.
So, any last words you would like to share? If you want to share any information about yourself, or
definitely. Thank you, Bill, for having me. And folks can find me right now just on LinkedIn, Aaron Chavis, or heartsandmind.com. I'll be doing some workshops coming into the spring around the healing and just where empathy shows up for folks in the workplace and partnering with you in relationships and what do we do post-COVID. So it'll be more to come around empathy and emotional intelligence from me in the near future. For now, heartsandmind.com.
And that's Hearts in Mind.
Yeah, Hearts in Mind.
I-N, not A-N-D.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, in mind. And then they can email, probably the best way too is heartsinmindllc@gmail.com.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I wish you the best. Hopefully we could collaborate a little bit more moving forward and help spread the love, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
And that will do it for this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Empathy episode. I'm Bill Simpson. Thank you for listening and taking time to learn and grow to be a better you in relationship. Here's a quote about empathy from author Jonathan Franzen that says, "Love is about bottomless empathy, born out of the heart's revelation that another person is every bit as real as you are." I love it. So what happens when you do everything you can to save your marriage or relationship and it just doesn't work and you have to end it? How do you see this as a good thing? Please join me for the next episode where I answer these questions and more in the Enough is Enough episode. And remember, if you have any questions or issues about your relationship you need help with, please email me at bill@pathways2livingwell.com. That's bill@pathways2livingwell.com. And if you know someone you think might benefit from listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.